Okay, so I just did the short review for Mockingjay Part 2, which I saw last night. Now, this is going to be the extended review for this film. The way the extended review works is that I'm going to be saying similar things that I said with the short review, because I'm just kind of going on stream of consciousness here, telling you what I thought about the film. But I'm going to take more time. I'm going to really go into some details, things that bother me, things that I enjoyed, things that I can remember a bit more than other things. I mean, these films go by pretty fast. It's really late when I saw this one. But I'm going to take my time here. So this is a bit of a longer film or video for you guys. And it's just for the people who want to have some more information. If you really don't want to be bothered with any of that, go to the short film, which you'll have the link below to go to. Okay, so let's get into it. I gave Mockingjay Part 2, just right off the bat, I'll give you the score right now. I gave it a 3 out of 5 with an increment of a 0.5 each. So 3 out of 5 means it's not a bad film, but it's not as good as it could be. I really feel that this film had more that it could do. Now, I really wasn't as invested in this as I am with other franchises. Mockingjay Part 1 was kind of boring for me. I really don't like when they split these finales into 2 films when they don't need to, especially with a book series when it's just one book. I mean, if you could read it in one sitting and get all the information that you need, I think you can get a longer film and do the same thing. Granted, in 3 hours, it's a lot harder to convey what you're going to read in maybe a 10-hour period in a book, but still, I just think that the trend and the fad of getting young adult fiction and making it into split finales doesn't make any sense to me. Why don't you split other increments of the franchise? I don't understand that. Harry Potter was the first one to do it. I kind of got it because Deathly Hallows was a book that was about this thick. That was covering a history of 7 books. So in this case, it had 2 other books before it, so it's the history, including this one, 3 books. I don't see the point of that. They didn't do it the 3rd installment of Harry Potter. I mean, Tolkien made 3 books for Lord of the Rings, and they made 3 movies out of Lord of the Rings. I mean, you had The Hobbit making 3 movies out of 1 book, and it didn't make any sense to me. And this doesn't make any sense to me either. This movie was a bit just too long. It's 2.5 hours to tell you the end of a story that you already had 2.5 hours of beforehand. So what went wrong here, I felt? Let's see. Well, what I felt went wrong here, apart from just splitting it up, was just the decisions of what to focus on. You have a lot going on in Mockingjay Part 2. Alert right now, there will be spoilers for the previous Hunger Games movies, the details that I can remember, and there will be some spoilers for Mockingjay Part 2 in this review. So if you also want it spoiler-free, go to the short review. I'm not going to give any spoilers there, but here there be spoilers. What happened that I didn't like in this film was that they didn't really know what to focus on. You have the political story, which is the main heart and chunk of it. You know, you have the Hunger Games, you have Panem in distress, Katniss wants to defeat Snow and everybody in the Capitol, and I understand all that, and that's all cool, and you really focus on it. And that is the main focus of the movie. Good. However, you also have this love triangle between her and Peeta and Gale, and okay, I understand that for some audiences that's really necessary and it's really cool, and I think they could focus on it as well, but they didn't need to focus on it the way they focused on it. They had so many scenes of them just sitting in the dark and her talking to Peeta while she's trying to get him out of some sort of mind brainwashing thing that the Capitol did to him. And again, I understand that's really important to the plot as well for the development of the character, but at the same time, it wasn't really explored enough here. It was just talked about and used to just fill up time. Nobody in those scenes seemed to really give a shit about the romance aspect of it. Jennifer Lawrence seemed to not really give a flying fuck about Peeta, and Peeta vice versa. Nobody really cared about any of it. They just talked about it. And it was just kind of overdone. Just excuses to get Peeta involved, to get the whole thing going. And it ended up being exactly the way you would want it to be, or expect it to be as well. I mean, you have the established boyfriend, you have the new interesting guy. Who do you think she's going to go for? I'm not going to spoil that for you. Who do you think she's going to go for? You'll find out. But the point is, it's obvious. And that's my main problem with this film. It was so obvious. So much of it is obvious. There are many deaths because they really looked at the Harry Potter books and were like, okay, well, there's a lot of interesting deaths here. I'll put a lot of interesting deaths in my final story as well. And they all those characters that you look at from Hunger Games until now, and you go, if that person dies, I'm out. They die. And that's exactly what you expect from a finale like this. All the people that have some sort of emotional baggage for the audience have to go, and Katniss has to save the day. That's exactly what happens. I saw it coming. I was like, that person's going to die, that person's going to die, this person's going to die, and that person's going to die, and boom, 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 boom. Almost in that order, they died. Now, beyond just them dying, it was just kind of uninspired the way these people died as well. Some of them had to die a hero, or other people had to die to suit the plot and make her do a particular thing, and some of them were martyrs, or some of them just were dead. I couldn't even figure out who died in some instances, because maybe I think there's one sequence in which they killed 3 people in just one go, and that was it. All these people they just introduced to you, and some of the people that you knew, and then we don't care. It was very similar to the Battle of Hogwarts and Harry Potter, how just so many people die that you lose track of who's dying, and to no emotional effect really. You had Katniss, who's just stoic, like, oh no, they're dead, and only at the very end does she have a big breakdown about it, which is cool. I understand that, but it just didn't hit for me. I couldn't really care about these deaths. In the moment, before they die, when you see how cool they are, like, yeah, I really hope you don't die. And then they do, and you're like, oh, well, who cares? Bigger picture. And that's the power of war and the strength of it and all, but at the same time, she's constantly fighting to be a warrior, and she's acting like one. And they're not really making a commentary on, you're just as bad as you think everybody else is, Katniss. No, not at all. She's actually supposed to be genuinely better than everybody else. She doesn't believe in war. She thinks war is bad. Other people are actually succumbing to the idea of war. And like, this is what happens in a war, Katniss. And she's like, no, it doesn't have to. But yet, at the same time, people die. And she's like, oh, wow, that sucks. Bummer. Move along. Because she has a bigger picture, which is war. That's how war works. So those commentaries just didn't really hit home for me. I will say this, though. The cinematography, as ever, is great. It looks good. The filters that they've used look really good in this film. Really nice shots and angles for it. Pacing is really cool. There are moments where, there are still moments that I was really tense and expecting something dramatic to happen, and it did. But unfortunately, when the drama hits in this film, it hits hard. I mean, it's really, there's no room for interpretation. You don't even get to be sad because it's like, aren't you sad? The score kicks in, and it's the most ridiculous score I've heard in years. It's so dramatic. I mean, it's so much as somebody trips and falls, and you're like, dun, 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 because they tripped and fell. And I mean, that's the level of dramatic music we're talking about here. We're talking about just dun, dun, dun kind of stuff. And I couldn't stand it. I understand you need some dramatic music in a big shootout fight or somebody dies or whatever, but it doesn't need to sound like something from a 1990s soap opera or something, and that's the kind of level that it felt for me. Really didn't understand what they were going for the soundtrack. You did have a really awesome drum sequence in which they had to go to a particular ceremony, which I will not spoil. But that drum sequence was cool, but at the same time, it sounded like a soundtrack, and then they tried to put it in the film. They're like, look, they're playing the drums, and they're doing the thing that you're hearing, except for the thing you're hearing is way more badass than any ceremony in the history of ever would have possibly fucking done. So it just completely pulled me out of the reality of the situation, because it's like, no, your world is in a movie, but your world isn't a movie. And I don't think anybody in this movie would have thought up, let's have this drum sequence to be this particular way. So these little tiny things are really annoying in this film. The drama is over the top to the point of no emotion. And there are even points where there are lines in this film that I swear to you are just rehashes of things in really shitty movies. One of the generals, I forget her name, but she's a character that you meet really early on in the film, and she eventually becomes a major player in the political system of the film. She's the only one who's kind of like in the middle of everything, and on like a middle wavelength of like, no, we can both be at war and making peace at the same time, so we can both destroy and fix, old and new kind of stuff. Fine, I like that type of character. You need somebody like that. However, when you're trying to say lines to show how good of a person is, you really don't want to borrow from the book of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. I swear to God to you, multiple times, she paraphrased the line, I will not condone a course of action that will lead us to war. It pulled me out constantly. Every time she kept saying stuff like that, she said it in that over-dramatic Star Wars prequel way as well. It's kind of like flat, yet with a lot of emphasis. I'm like, thank you, young Keira Knightley. That's what it felt like to me. And those sorts of silly moments are really just kind of absurd for me in this film, which is a film that's taking itself very seriously, and then it has these little moments where it's just kind of like they didn't really try, and then you're like, alright, I'm watching a movie. And that's not cool. There are enough movies out there that don't do that. Hell, Hunger Games and Catching Fire did not do this for me. I actually was sucked into those films. I loved how brutal they were. I loved how the emotional core of them was really tight, really there. The love triangle between Peeta, Gale, and Katniss was also something that, between the first 2 films, was actually something I could actually care about, because there was a lot of shit going on, and there were reasons to go for either side. And by now, it's like, no, we're all in this war, and one of you is brainwashed, and Katniss is like, you know what, fuck it, I have bigger things to deal with than you 2 guys who are trying to hump me all the time. And I guess if they would have put more emphasis on her not giving a shit, it would have been a great, great moment, because you would have seen this warrior of Katniss, this political figure, the person who really wanted to do what she was set out to do, which was assassinate Snow. But unfortunately, she was wanting to go assassinate Snow at all costs, to all these pods, which are kind of traps in the city. She'll go through all that sort of shit to get to Snow, but at the same time, she's going to worry about who she has feelings for, because these guys are just constantly grabbing her to the side and like, you do love me, right? And who cares? Go away, Chris Hemsworth, brother. Little Thor, go away. It didn't really feel right. It was completely out of place to have a love triangle in this film. And to even address it by the end of all of it, I mean, it's a satisfying ending when you get to all of the political shenanigans. Once she gets to the palace, it's really tense, really good stuff. I'll also say that's another thing that's really good in this film. The tension's really nice. There's really a lot of brutality in this film. I quite enjoyed the brutality. But it's still not as brutal as, say, previous films. That's funny, because here in the Netherlands, this movie got a 16 rating, which is the equivalent of an R rating in the United States because of the violence in it. And yet, actually, there are only maybe one or two actual violent sequences in this entire film. The rest of they're action-heavy. I mean, you have guns shooting at them, and they dodge. You go, oh, no! But out of the deaths that happen, I can only remember one that made me go, oh, shit! Which I remember in Catching Fire. That was like every 5 minutes, somebody had an oh, shit kind of moment. And this one, to up the rating, because it's the later film, I mean, they did it with Harry Potter, they've done it with Dark Knight Rises. Those films also had their ratings elevated because they were more violent and graphic films than before. There was no need. It just seemed like a trend, you know? So I have no idea why they boosted up the rating, because there was nothing really that bad in it. I mean, it was the more neutered of the 4 films. Even part 1 had more intense violence in it. So, I don't know about that. There's also a couple moments when it came to the CGI that I was really unimpressed. You have the mutts, which are in the sewer system. There's these mutated people, and they're attacking them, and they're looking all gnarly and such, yet they really didn't look like they were there. They looked like people were just going, ah, and then they kind of colored a CGI man on top of it. That's not good. You had guns that were popping out with the pods, all those sort of, those traps really looked just super CGI, like they weren't really there. There was nothing to be frightened of. Also, one thing, I was talking about tension just a moment ago. Though I enjoyed the tension of this film, the final moments of the political story of this film are just really intense. I could feel my heart beating in my chest like that. Really nice. Any other tense moment in this film came about because, and I shit you not, because of jump scares. Jump scares. There are jump scares in this movie. This is a teenage action film, post-apocalyptic dystopian thing, and there are jump scares like a freaking horror movie in this thing. I mean, you're jumping out of your skin because the music, it does the shock thing that really shitty horror movies these days do. So they're walking around, and then you might have a moment where a guy turns around and pulls a gun on him. It's like, bam! And I jumped because the music hit me, but if you just turned around and there was a tense moment, I would go, ooh, what's going to happen here? Because the scenario itself is not shocking. Apart from one or two instances, they didn't really shock me with what was happening. They shocked me because it was like, ah! And then you're, oh my god, what's happening? So I couldn't understand why they put jump scares into this movie, and the audience, of course, were all just jumping and, you know, you had teenage girls who were loving that shit, and that's great. If you're in the age category for the books and still for what they're aiming for the films, because I think they're still very much aiming for a teenage audience, you're going to love it. It's great. But I really don't think that for somebody like me, who's an idol viewer, who's a little bit older, who's seen just a shitload of kind of stories like this, it doesn't really do enough. But that's sad for me because the first 2 films did a lot. Mockingjay as a story just doesn't do it for me. And that could just be finale syndrome. It could be like, you know, we're getting to the end, therefore things are different. I mean, obviously we're not in the Hunger Games anymore. We're in the middle of the war. And yet they bring the Hunger Games back by putting pods in the Capitol, which is a weird thing to do. And I mean, it adds some cool moments. There's one really, really cool death in this movie. But for the most part, it's just bizarre. Also, the action sequences are way too big, way too long. That's right. I'm a dude, and I'm saying there's too much action in this movie. There's too much in this movie. Not saying that there are too many action sequences. I actually like a film that does a lot of peppered stuff. If you watch Mad Max, Fury Road, it is one gigantic action sequence, and it does not let up, and it is amazing. It has different little set pieces throughout the entire film, and it's really nice. But in this particular film, in Mockingjay Part 2, they just have like maybe 3 or 4, and they just go, these 3 or 4, when you can see scenarios where they should be able to get out of this by now, and then they don't. There's one moment where they're going through the sewers to get away from all the pods, and of course Snow figures it out, so he sets some pods up from where they're going to get out. He finds their exit strategy. They get out. You have around 50 commandos, these peacekeepers, come in just shooting at them, like, oh no, and they're running and they're shooting back, and then all of a sudden the lights in the room just beam down these just kind of lasers that disintegrate people. And then, so they're dodging that shit. And then the floor freaking explodes with all kinds of blades shooting up and down. And they have to run their asses off to not get hit by bullets, lasers, and blades. Now, I understand that's cool. That's awesome. And yet, it's way too much. I mean, this is about a 5 to 6 minute sequence of them running down a road. And then finally they get to this little area where it's just kind of blocked off, where the blades clearly are not marked anymore, like in a video game. And they jump and they get over on the side of it. And then they're safe. And then they're like, oh man, whew, oh, I'm really tired. Except for they have the fucking peacekeepers who are only like 50 meters away shooting at them with assault rifles. And they're just kind of like, man, I can't wait until I catch my breath, you know? Oof, I don't know what's going to happen here. I'm like, go, run, get the hell out of there. The urgency is just a bit weird in this film. They're urgent at some moments and they're not at others, and it just doesn't work for me. I wasn't buying it. I wasn't buying this film, and that's the whole problem with it. I'm really glad that I have a card to my local cinema because I didn't actually have to pay a singular ticket for this. I didn't have to waste any of my individual viewing money on this. I just had to waste a little bit of time to see it. I don't think it's a complete waste of time. I'm going to give it a 3. Like I said, I think that it is a decently made film. Apart from the CGI and the score, all the technical little bits work out just fine. Acting is fine. Cinematography's fine. It's just pacing is off. Script is off. That sort of stuff. But the script is the backbone for a film. Also, I will say this. This movie has 3 endings. 3 endings. That is... I mean, they did this with Harry Potter with the post ending of like, look at my kids when we're... Hello to me. And that was a bit, who cares? And they did the same thing here. First you have the whole downfall of the Capitol, because, okay, I'm sorry, spoiler alert, they win. Ha, who didn't see that coming? So they win, spoiler alert, they get that done. Capitol falls. That's that ending. Katniss isn't shit because of what she did. Fine, that was a great ending. Then they say, okay, you can go home now. We pardoned you. Cool. Then they have another ending in which she goes back to District 12, and stays there for a really long time, gets really sad about all the losses that she's had to endure, and tries to adjust to life. They call back to the past 3 films. Every time they were in District 12 in the past 3 films, they call back to those moments and show her do things that parallel with them, like going hunting like she used to do with Gale, and go foraging, and go to those locations. They're very recognizable, very poetic, very cool, whatever. That's the... Except for then at that moment... Whoever she chose, I'm still not going to tell you, but whoever she chose shows up. And then they show that they have a nice life together. And eventually, you know, they're sleeping in different beds and she decides, I'm going to go and have a relationship now. And goes and sleeps in the bed with this person. That's the second ending. And you're thinking, okay, finally it's over. I mean, we just spent like 20 minutes watching her walk through the fucking woods. And then they decide to tack on another little ending, which is just her with her lover and their children, and then her saying some weird motivational thing of like, my life was shit, to her baby, who is Asian for some reason, even though neither of the people who have birthed this child have any sort of Asian features whatsoever. But I guarantee you, that's either an Inuit or an Asian baby. I'm going for Asian. That's weird casting. Just saying. So that's my complaint with this, is that they didn't pay attention to a lot of details, drag shit out that didn't need to be dragged out. I mean, the whole relationship thing, it's like, you just tacked it on at the end of the film. Unnecessary. You could have done this fluidly throughout the entire thing. Stanley Tucci's in the movie for only like 4 minutes, so that is just insulting to me. Stanley Tucci makes a lot of things a lot better. So, what are you going to do? Philip Seymour Hoffman, fantastic, even though I do think I can figure out where they put some CGI face masking in there. But that's okay, it wasn't that distracting, and he was great in this movie for the little bit of screen time that he still had in this particular film. And just about everybody who did have speaking role did a good job with that speaking role. So kudos to them for doing a decent and admirable job. So acting-wise, it's good. Action-wise, it has some pretty decent scenes, if not a little over the top sometimes. And the twists just didn't do anything for me. I saw the deaths coming a mile away. And yeah, so if you can get past the CGI, the poor score, and the freaking 3 endings, I mean, this is worse than Frodo getting on the damn boat at the Return of the King. It was really like a good half hour, 20 minutes, where I was like, can I go home? I've seen what I wanted to see now. And if you're there for the romance, stay. Watch it to the end, and you may or may not be happy with the ending. So that was my assessment of this. But what did you guys feel? I've already asked you that for the short one, but now you've heard more about my complaints about this. If you've seen the film, I'd really like to hear what you have to say about these little nitpicky things that I picked out. Was there anything that kind of got to you? So feel free to do the spoilers. So spoiler alert for the comments. If you don't want to have any spoilers, don't look at the comments here. But just, you know, what did you think about those things? Am I just being too nitpicky? Am I an asshole? Let me know. Say, hey, dude, you suck, because that was really cool, yo. Fine. I want to hear about it. I want to hear your views about it. I want to know what you thought about the film. And if you haven't seen it yet, did this help you? Did you want to see a spoilery review? What did you think? Did I dissuade you or whatever? Because that's not my goal. I don't want to tell you not to see it. It's got a 3. Go see it. It's, you know, it's a nice night for, you know, let's go see a movie. Yeah, go see it. But, you know, I just want to know what you guys think. So let me know. Put some comments right there, right below. Give me a like. Give me a subscription. It'd be great. I would like any of that, please. And if you don't like it, give me a dislike. That's fine. That's fine too. Whatever. As long as I'm getting views, I guess. So bring it in. Bring in the hate. Bring in the love. Bring it all. I want to hear what you have to say, and we'll talk about it. Okay, guys. Thank you so much for sitting and listening to this really long rant and this is really, really, really extensive review. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know. Do you think I should continue the short and long reviews? Should I just do standard short reviews? I also want to know about that. And I'll see you guys next time with the next film review. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.